Hey everyone, have you ever had a night where everything seems perfectly normal until something happens that you can't explain? What would you do if you were home alone and suddenly you hear strange knocks at your door, but when you open it, no one's there? Or imagine being at a Halloween party, surrounded by friends, only to realize that something is lurking in the shadows, waiting to turn your night into a nightmare. Tonight, we're diving into two chilling stories where the line between reality and terror is thin, and the dangers you can't see are often the ones that hunt you the most. Are you ready to find out what happens when curiosity goes too far and when the terror follows you home? Stick around and let us know in the comments, what would you do if you found yourself trapped in one of these nightmarish situations? Would you run, hide, or face the terror head on? Let's find out together. Stay tuned. It was supposed to be the perfect Halloween night. I had just turned 22, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself. Ryan's annual Halloween bash was legendary. It was the one party everyone talked about for months. His house was a maze of grotesque decorations, flickering lights that threw eerie shadows, and life-sized animatronic figures that looked like they might come to life at any moment. I remember stepping inside, feeling the chill of the night air creep up my spine as I crossed the threshold. The music was blaring, people were laughing, and the smell of pumpkin spice and cider filled the air. It was the kind of party where you could lose yourself, where the world outside didn't exist. But as soon as I stepped into the living room, something didn't feel right. The laughter was too loud, the music too frantic. It was as if the energy in the room was off. People were drinking and dancing, but the smile seemed forced, like they were trying to drown out something they couldn't name. I tried to shake off the feeling, convincing myself it was just my nerves. After all, it was Halloween, a night for the supernatural, a night for the creepy and unsettling. But then, a noise. It was faint at first, a soft thud, like something heavy had fallen in the distance. I glanced toward the stairs, trying to ignore the growing tension in the air. That's when I heard it again, louder this time. A bang. A loud, jarring noise that sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. Ryan, usually the life of the party, froze. He stared at the door with wide, horrified eyes, his face pale as a sheet. Without saying a word, he bolted for the stairs, his feet pounding the floor as he descended into the darkness below. I watched him go, feeling the hair on the back of my neck rise. Something was wrong. The room seemed to close in on me, the air growing thicker, heavier, like something was pressing against me from all sides. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone in that house anymore. There was something here, something watching us. Then the scream came. It pierced through the house like a knife, raw and desperate, followed by a loud crash that reverberated through the walls. It was a sound that didn't belong at a party. It was a sound of pure terror. My heart slammed in my chest as I looked around the room, but no one else seemed to notice. People were still dancing, still laughing, unaware of the nightmare that had already begun to unfold. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I grabbed my coat, but my legs were shaking. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But the house was no longer a place of celebration. It was a trap, and we were the prey. The music died down, like someone had turned the volume knob all the way to zero. For a moment, it felt like the house had stopped breathing. The noise from the party faded into a heavy silence, broken only by the distant, hurried footsteps of Ryan, now echoing from downstairs. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest, struggling to catch my breath. Then, something else broke the stillness, a thud, a sharp, sickening thud, followed by a bone-chilling silence. The room, once alive with energy, now felt suffocating. I could barely hear my own thoughts, as panic began to crawl its way up my spine. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer, every creak of the floorboards amplified in the oppressive quiet. I looked around. People were still milling about, but their expressions had changed. The smiles were gone, replaced with wide, fearful eyes. No one dared speak. Ryan hadn't come back, and the unease in the air had only grown thicker. I felt a cold sweat forming at the back of my neck, but it wasn't from the cool night air. Then, without warning, the door to the living room rattled. It wasn't the playful knock of a trick-or-treater. No, this was something else entirely. A forceful, deliberate knock, as if someone or something was trying to get in. My breath caught in my throat. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but my feet were glued to the floor. The next sound I heard was unmistakable. The door crashed open. The door crashed open with a deafening sound, sending a shockwave of fear through my entire body. My pulse hammered in my ears as the darkness from the hallway seeped into the room, swallowing everything in its path. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. The air grew colder, the kind of cold that gnawed at your bones, making every hair on your body stand on end. I could hear footsteps, slow and deliberate, from the hallway just outside the door. Each step seemed to shake the very foundation of the house, the weight of them vibrating through the floorboards beneath my feet. My hands were clammy, my chest tight, and yet I couldn't tear my eyes away from the doorway. Then, the first voice broke through the suffocating silence. It was a low growl, rough and guttural, dripping with malice. "Where are they?" it asked, each word crawling up my spine like the touch of icy fingers. My heart stopped for a second, and I thought I might suffocate from the pressure in the room. The sound of boots scraping against the floor grew louder, closer. I heard them moving, searching, the tension so thick it felt like it was choking the air out of me. My limbs were frozen, my throat dry, as I ducked behind the nearest piece of furniture, praying they wouldn't find me. But I knew deep down there was nowhere to hide. A scream sharp, desperate erupted from downstairs, shattering the quiet. My stomach turned. Someone was hurt. And it wasn't just any scream. It was a cry for help, a cry for mercy. The house was plunged into a suffocating silence, broken only by the faint sound of shuffling footsteps that grew nearer with each passing second. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure the intruders could hear it. Every instinct told me to run, to scream, but my body was paralyzed with fear. I pressed myself deeper into the shadows, praying the dark would swallow me whole. The air in the room felt like it was thickening, pressing down on me from all sides. The cold seemed to seep into my very bones, each breath coming out in shallow, panicked gasps. The footsteps were so close now, I could almost feel them brushing against the floorboards. I held my breath, my pulse thrumming in my ears. I tried to be as still as possible, hoping that if I didn't make a sound, they wouldn't find me. Then, the door to the room I was hiding in rattled violently. The handle twisted, and for a moment, I thought my heart would explode from the pressure building inside my chest. I could hear the intruders' low voices, rough and menacing, as they searched the room. The tension was unbearable. My skin prickled as they moved closer, each step vibrating through the floor. A voice guttural, mocking, broke the silence. "Found you," it sneered. I knew then that there was no escape. The door was thrown open with a violent crash, and the cold air from the hallway flooded in like a tidal wave of dread. There was no time to think, no time to react. I was trapped, and they were coming for me next. The door slammed open with a force that shook the walls, and I was thrown into a blind panic. The shadows from the hallway spilled into the room, enveloping me, making everything feel like it was closing in. The sound of boots on the wooden floor echoed through the dark, each step a brutal reminder that I was running out of time. My body tensed, every nerve screaming to run, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, too terrified to make a sound. I heard them searching, their footsteps growing closer, like a predator closing in on its prey. My breath caught in my throat as the heavy thud of boots stopped just outside the closet. They were right there. I could feel their presence, just beyond the door. The air was thick with tension, every second stretching into eternity. Then, the door creaked open, and the darkness rushed in like a living thing. I could see their silhouettes, faint in the dim light from the crack in the door. The voice that followed was low, cruel, and filled with a twisted pleasure. "Hide," it growled. "We know you're here." I held my breath, praying that somehow they wouldn't find me. But as the door was yanked open with a violent jerk, I knew it was over. They'd found me. The rush of panic surged through me like a tidal wave, but my limbs were numb, my body unwilling to cooperate. They reached for me, their cold, calloused hands closing around my arm, and in that instant, I knew I was no longer in control. I was completely at their mercy. And in darkness, there was no escape. The grip on my arm tightened, cold and unyielding. My heart hammered wildly in my chest, each beat thudding painfully against my ribs. I tried to pull away, but their fingers were like iron, locking me in place as if I were nothing more than prey. I could hear their ragged breathing, their footsteps echoing in the silence that swallowed the room. A sickening sense of dread flooded over me, as if the walls themselves were closing in, trapping me in an inescapable nightmare. I was dragged from the corner, my legs stumbling beneath me, fighting to stay upright. The sound of boots scraping against the floor echoed in the small, suffocating space. My mind screamed for me to do something, anything, but all I could do was struggle weakly against the force pulling me forward. I was shoved toward the door, and the world outside seemed to shift, like a dark, twisted version of reality. The hallway stretched out before me, swallowed by shadow, the faint sound of footsteps still behind me. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but no words would come. My throat was tight, choked with fear and desperation. The laughter of the intruders echoed in my ears, a low, mocking sound that made my stomach turn. It was clear now that they weren't just searching for me, they were hunting me, and the game was only beginning. My mind raced, but the darkness around me seemed to press harder, suffocating me with its weight. I was being dragged into something far worse than I could have ever imagined, and I knew that once I was fully in their grip, there would be no turning back. The darkness swallowed me whole, like I was falling into an abyss where time and space no longer existed. Every step felt heavier, every breath more labored as they dragged me through the cold, empty house. I couldn't see anything, only the black void that stretched endlessly before me. The only thing I could hear was the sound of their breathing, harsh, shallow, like something not quite human. They shoved me into the next room, and I collapsed to the floor, my body shaking violently from fear and adrenaline. The coldness of the floor pressed against my skin, but I couldn't focus on anything except the overwhelming sense of helplessness. My hands trembled as I tried to push myself up, but I was too weak, too disoriented. The room around me was silent, too silent. The kind of silence that gnaws at your soul, the kind that makes you question whether you're truly alone, or if something is waiting for you to make the first move. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch and sway, as if alive, as if they were watching me, waiting for me to make a sound. Then, a whisper so soft, so cold, it made my blood run cold. "You should have never come here." The voice came from the darkness, cutting through the stillness like a knife. I froze. That voice, so familiar, yet so wrong. It was a voice I had heard before, but where? Suddenly, the light flickered, and I saw their faces, cold, dead, eyes filled with malice. It was too late. I was already lost. The room remained frozen in eerie silence, the shadows closing in tighter, wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. I could feel the weight of their gaze, cold and calculating, as they circled me. Their faces twisted in cruel amusement, grinning with sharp, predatory teeth that glinted in the dim light. Their eyes, lifeless yet burning with malice, never left me. I wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but my body refused to obey. It was as if the fear had paralyzed me, each breath coming harder than the last. My chest felt heavy, suffocating under the pressure of their gaze. There was no escape. One of them stepped forward, his grin widening as he leaned in, his cold breath washing over me. "It's over," he whispered, the words like a death sentence. The air seemed to grow even colder, the room spinning as darkness closed in on me. My vision blurred, and I knew, deep down, there was no way out. I had been trapped from the moment I stepped foot into this house. And then, everything went black. The last thing I heard was the echo of their twisted laughter, fading into the nothingness as I slipped into the void. The nightmare had claimed me. It was a quiet Halloween night in Chicago, the kind of night where the cool air makes the trees sway and the city feels almost deserted. Ethan Carter, 28, was enjoying his first real moment of peace in weeks. Alone in his small, dimly lit home, he sank deep into the couch, letting the comforting silence wrap around him as he settled into a Halloween movie marathon. The flickering shadows cast by the jack-o'-lanterns on his front porch only added to the spooky ambiance, but it was exactly what Ethan wanted. He had always preferred the calm, especially on a night like this, where everything outside felt both inviting and mysterious. The first knock came just after midnight. It was sharp, forceful, and echoed through the still air. Ethan froze, his attention snapping from the television to the door. His eyes flicked to the front window, nothing. No cars, no movement, just the creeping fog of the city streets. He sighed, shaking it off. Probably just the wind, he thought, rubbing his eyes. But then, the knock came again. Louder, more insistent. Something felt wrong. Ethan got up, heart beginning to pound, and moved toward the door, the old wooden floor creaking beneath his feet. He peered through the peephole. Nothing. Just the empty street, swallowed by darkness. No trick-or-treaters. No one at all. He checked the clock, 12:15. His mind raced. Who would be out there at this hour? Confused but growing uneasy, he locked the door again, trying to brush off the feeling clawing at his chest. But the knocks didn't stop. Each one was more urgent, more demanding. He felt the pulse of dread rising inside him, choking his breath. What do they want? Suddenly, a cold chill swept through the house. His skin prickled. Ethan turned around, almost expecting to see someone standing behind him. His pulse quickened as he grabbed the handle to open the door. And then, nothing. Silence. But as he stepped away, the knock came again. Only this time, it wasn't on the door. It came from the window. And then, from the other side of the house. Ethan's blood ran cold. Someone was here, and they weren't going away. Ethan's breath hitched in his chest as the knocking moved from the door to the window, then to the side of the house. His heart pounded loudly in his ears, drowning out everything else. He rushed to the other windows, pulling back the curtains, but the night outside was empty. No one, nothing but darkness. He felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The feeling of being watched settled over him like a heavy weight. The silence was deafening now, but it felt wrong, like the calm before a storm. Then came another knock, louder, this time on the back door. His body was frozen, paralyzed by a deep, gut-wrenching sense of dread. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if something was pressing in on him from all sides. Ethan's feet felt like they were glued to the floor as he stared at the door handle, almost daring it to turn on its own. This isn't normal, he thought. His mind raced with wild thoughts, trying to make sense of it all, but nothing seemed to add up. Who would be knocking on a door at this hour, and why was it so relentless? He made his way slowly toward the back door, his footsteps almost inaudible in the heavy silence. As he reached for the handle, he heard it soft at first, but unmistakable the sound of breathing. Slow, deliberate, like someone was waiting just on the other side. His heart skipped a beat. Who, or what was out there? Before he could move, the door handle jiggled violently. Ethan's pulse raced as a voice whispered, "Let me in." It was a low, chilling growl, one that froze him to his core. Ethan's body stiffened, every muscle locked in place, as the voice sent a chill down his spine. "Let me in." The words echoed in his mind, their meaning twisting, like a dagger in his gut. The door handle rattled again, louder this time, as if someone or something was desperate to get in. Ethan could feel the blood drain from his face as he stood there, paralyzed by fear. The sound of steady, deliberate breathing grew louder from the other side of the door, each exhale like a whisper from the depths of hell. Ethan wanted to scream, to shout for help, but his voice betrayed him. He couldn't move. Every part of his body screamed to run, to hide, but he couldn't tear his gaze away from the door. The very air around him seemed to thicken, pressing in on him with a suffocating heaviness. Then, the door creaked. A sickeningly slow, drawn-out sound. The wood groaned under pressure, as if something unseen was forcing its way through. Ethan could see the thin gap between the door and the frame widen just slightly. He pressed his back against the wall, trying to make himself as small as possible. But the darkness outside the door seemed to pour in like a living thing, a presence he couldn't escape. A sudden bang echoed through the room. His heart nearly stopped. The door was kicked in, and with it, the last shred of safety Ethan had felt. The room was plunged into darkness, and as he stumbled back, he heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, closing in on him. He wasn't alone anymore. The door had been torn off its hinges with such force that Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The room was now flooded with cold, oppressive darkness. His breath came in shallow gasps as he stumbled backward, the weight of the silence threatening to crush him. Every step he took felt heavier, as if the air itself was working against him. He could feel the presence, the unmistakable feeling that something was lurking in the shadows, waiting, watching. The footsteps outside were slow but deliberate. They didn't hurry, no. They were patient, as if the thing outside had all the time in the world to torment him. Ethan's hand trembled as he reached for his phone, but it slipped from his grasp, hitting the floor with a sickening thud that seemed to reverberate through the house. He froze, staring at the darkened hallway, every muscle in his body stiff with fear. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, the house was completely still. Ethan held his breath, praying it was over, praying it was just his mind playing tricks on him. But the silence only lasted for a few seconds before it was shattered by a voice low, guttural, and filled with venom. "I know you're here." It was a voice that chilled him to the bone. A voice that seemed to come from the very darkness itself. Ethan's legs trembled, but he forced himself to move, running blindly through the house. His feet pounded on the hardwood floors, but the sound of his own panic was drowned out by the heavy footsteps that began following him. Every door he passed was wide open, but no one was there. No one but him. Ethan turned a corner and nearly ran into the window, but when he looked outside, he saw nothing but the thick veil of night. There was nowhere to hide. He was trapped, and the thing behind him wasn't far away. Its breath was closer now. Ethan could feel the coldness pressing into his back as he desperately searched for an escape. The walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating him. He could hear it now, the breathing, slow and steady, just inches from him. It was getting closer, and he was out of time. Ethan's heart raced as he whipped around, desperate for any escape. The shadows in the hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, their dark forms twisting as if they were alive, reaching for him. His breath caught in his throat, and his feet slammed against the floor in frantic, heavy steps. But no matter how fast he moved, the sounds behind him grew louder. Closer, the slow, deliberate breathing, the soft shuffle of footsteps, the undeniable certainty that the thing following him was gaining ground. He darted into the living room, his eyes scanning frantically for a way out. The front door was wide open, but the darkness beyond it was too thick to see anything. Where was it? Where was the escape? The door. The back door. Ethan pushed toward the kitchen, stumbling on the rug, his pulse pounding in his ears. His hands were slick with sweat as he reached for the back door. But just as he grabbed the handle, he heard it again, the voice. This time, it wasn't a whisper. It was loud, commanding, and unmistakably close. "You can't escape me." A cold hand gripped his arm before he even realized what was happening. Ethan froze, every muscle locked in terror as the fingers dug into his flesh. The air around him turned even colder, freezing the very marrow in his bones. He tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed by the thick silence that enveloped him. His body trembled uncontrollably, and his mind was racing, trying to find a way out. He turned around, and there it was, a figure cloaked in darkness, its features obscured by the blackness around it. The thing's face was a twisted mask of malice, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Ethan's blood ran cold. There was nowhere left to run. The figure stepped forward, the floorboards creaking beneath its weight. "You were never to escape," it hissed. And with those words, the door slammed shut, trapping him in the suffocating darkness with the thing that had been stalking him all night. Ethan was no longer alone. Ethan's mind raced, each thought fragmented, barely able to keep up with the horror unfolding before him. The thing that had been stalking him all night was now standing in front of him, its presence suffocating. The air grew so cold that Ethan could see his breath fogging in the darkness. The figure was closer now, its features slowly becoming clearer. Its eyes glowed faintly, an unnatural yellow that seemed to pierce through the shadows. The skin around its face was stretched tight, pale and almost translucent, revealing veins that pulsed with a sickening rhythm. It had no mouth, only a jagged scar that twisted across where its lips should have been. Its hands were long, twisted claws that clicked together with a sickening sound. Ethan took a step back, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from his chest. The thing's gaze locked onto him, its eyes narrowing with cruel amusement. "You shouldn't have opened the door," it whispered, its voice a low, rasping hiss that made the hairs on the back of Ethan's neck stand on end. "You wanted to be alone. But now, you will never be alone again." Terror surged through Ethan like an electric shock. He turned and bolted for the door, but as his hand touched the handle, a freezing grip seized his wrist, yanking him back into the room. His body slammed against the wall, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. He looked up, and there it was. The thing's twisted face was inches from his own. Its cold breath washed over him, the stench of decay and rot making him gag. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The thing's clawed hand reached for him, its fingers curling around his neck with terrifying strength. "There's no escape," it whispered, tightening its grip. Ethan's world began to fade to black. Well, that was one terrifying journey, wasn't it? But now, I want to know, have you ever had a night like this? Have you ever heard strange knocks on your door? Or found yourself trapped in a situation you couldn't explain? What would you do if you were in one of these stories? If you've experienced something eerie or just have a creepy tale you want to share, drop it in the comments below. And if you want me to tell your story in one of our next videos, just let me know. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. And if you're brave enough, subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a new chilling tale. Stay safe, and remember, sometimes the scariest things are the ones we can't see.